Barron Trump sat in a corner of a bustling cafe, trying to go unnoticed. But when a stranger confronted him, no one could have predicted the shocking response that would follow. Where are you watching from? Let us know in the comments, and don't forget to like, share, and please complete our 1,000 subscribers for more inspiring stories. The Café, nestled on a cobblestone street in Washington, D.C., was the epitome of a cozy urban retreat. The aroma of freshly brewed coffee mingled with the scent of buttery croissants, creating a haven for students, professionals, and retirees alike. It was the kind of place where time seemed to slow down, allowing its patrons to momentarily escape the chaos of the outside world. Barron Trump stepped in quietly, his tall frame slightly hunched to avoid attention. He wore a simple gray hoodie and jeans, a baseball cap pulled low over his eyes. Despite his efforts to blend in, a few heads turned. His face, though familiar from countless headlines and photos, carried an air of humility rather than entitlement. He made his way to the corner table by the large window, a spot bathed in soft sunlight. Pulling out a book, an aged copy of To Kill a Mockingbird, he settled into his chair, occasionally glancing outside at the bustling street. The young man had learned to find solace in books, where the noise of public judgment couldn't reach him. The barista approached with a cappuccino, her hands trembling slightly as she placed it on his table. "Here you go, sir," she said softly, clearly nervous but kind. "Thank you," Barron replied with a small smile, his voice warm yet reserved. As he sipped his coffee, the cafe's usual rhythm seemed to resume. Soft conversations, the click of laptop keys, and the occasional burst of laughter from a nearby table. But Barron couldn't help but notice the occasional glances thrown his way. He was used to it by now. His last name was both a privilege and a burden. At a table across the room, a man in his mid-40s was less subtle. Stocky, with a booming voice, he leaned toward his companion, gesturing in Barron's direction. His tone, though muffled, carried hints of indignation. "That's him," the man muttered loudly enough for nearby patrons to hear. "Sitting there like he's one of us. Do you know what his family stands for?" The companion, a younger woman, gave a nervous laugh. "Maybe he's just here for coffee," she said, trying to defuse the situation. "Coffee?" the man scoffed. "These people think they can just waltz into our lives without facing consequences." The man's frustration seemed to grow, fueled by his own assumptions. Finally, unable to contain himself, he stood up, his chair scraping loudly against the floor. The cafe's chatter faded into a tense silence as he strode toward Barron's table. Barron looked up as the man approached, his expression calm but curious. "You're Barron Trump, aren't you?" the man asked, his voice loud enough to draw every pair of eyes in the room. "Yes, I am," Barron replied simply, closing his book and placing it on the table. The man's face twisted into a sneer. "You've got some nerve. Sitting here among regular people like nothing's happened. Do you even understand what people like your family have done to this country?" Barron blinked, momentarily taken aback by the directness of the accusation. He glanced around the room, noticing the mix of discomfort and intrigue on the faces of the other patrons. Some looked away, unwilling to get involved, while others leaned forward, eager to witness the unfolding drama. "I'm just having coffee," Barron said, his tone measured. "Coffee?" the man spat, his voice rising. "Do you even know what it's like to struggle, to work hard just to afford a single cup of coffee? People like you live in ivory towers, completely detached from reality." The man's words hung in the air, heavy with anger and resentment. Barron, however, didn't react defensively. Instead, he took a deep breath, his gaze steady and unflinching. "You're right," Barron said, his voice calm yet firm. "I've lived a life of privilege, and I won't pretend to understand the struggles that others go through. But I'm here because I want to learn, to see the world outside of those towers you mentioned. Does that make me unwelcome?" The man faltered, his mouth opening and closing as he searched for a retort. The room seemed to hold its breath, waiting for what would come next. For a moment, the cafe remained eerily silent. The man who had confronted Barron stood frozen, his fists clenched at his sides. The heat of his anger seemed to dissipate slightly as he registered the young man's composed response. Barron's words hadn't been defensive or dismissive. They were open, introspective, and honest. Still, the tension in the room was palpable. The barista, who had been wiping down a nearby table, stopped mid-motion, her eyes darting nervously between Barron and his accuser. A young couple at a nearby table whispered quietly, their expressions a mix of curiosity and unease. The man finally spoke, his voice lower but still laced with frustration. "You talk about wanting to learn, but how can you ever understand? You've had everything handed to you. People like me, people out here working day and night, we don't get that luxury." Barron leaned forward slightly, resting his hands on the table. His posture remained relaxed, but his eyes carried a seriousness that belied his age. "I can't argue with that," he said. "I've had privileges that most people will never experience, and I know that no apology or explanation can erase that fact. But isn't it better that I'm here, trying to understand instead of hiding behind the walls of privilege?" The man seemed caught off guard by the sincerity in Barron's tone. His shoulders relaxed slightly, and for the first time, doubt flickered across his face. "Words are easy," he muttered, though less convincingly than before. "You're absolutely right," Barron agreed. "Words are easy, but actions matter. So let me start here." Without breaking eye contact, Barron stood up and reached into his pocket, pulling out a crisp $20 bill. He extended it toward the barista, who stared at him in confusion. "This is for the next few customers," Barron said, his voice calm and steady. "Coffee should bring people together, not divide them." The barista hesitated, glancing at the man who had confronted Barron as if seeking his approval. The man looked away, his face a mixture of embarrassment and contemplation. Finally, the barista took the bill, nodding slightly. "Thank you," she whispered. Barron turned back to the man, his hands now resting at his sides. "I'm not perfect," he said, his voice carrying an edge of vulnerability. "And I can't undo the assumptions people have about me or my family, but I can listen, and I can try to be better. That's all I'm asking for, a chance to be seen as an individual, not just a last name." The man's jaw tightened as if he wanted to argue, but no words came out. Instead, he let out a long breath, his shoulders sagging. "Maybe I was too harsh," he admitted reluctantly. "It's just, when you've been struggling for so long, it's hard not to be angry when you see someone who's had it easy." Barron nodded slowly. "I get it, and I don't blame you for feeling that way. If there's one thing I've learned, it's that everyone's story matters, including yours." The man stared at him for a long moment before extending his hand. "Name's Ted," he said gruffly. Barron smiled, shaking Ted's hand firmly. "Barron, nice to meet you, Ted." The cafe erupted into quiet murmurs as the tension lifted. The barista, emboldened by the shift in atmosphere, announced, "Next 3 coffees are on the house, courtesy of this gentleman right here." A smattering of applause followed, with a few patrons clapping hesitantly at first, but gaining confidence as they realized the conflict had ended peacefully. Ted returned to his table, his expression softer, while Barron resumed his seat and opened his book once more. As the cafe returned to its usual hum of activity, a middle-aged woman approached Barron's table. "Excuse me," she said, her voice tinged with admiration. "I just wanted to say, that was impressive. Most people wouldn't have handled that so gracefully." Barron looked up, his cheeks coloring slightly. "Thank you," he said modestly. The woman smiled. "You know, it's not easy changing people's perceptions, but today you might have done just that." As she walked away, Barron turned his gaze back to the window. Outside, the world moved on as if nothing had happened, but inside the cafe, a small but significant moment had unfolded. It wasn't just about one young man standing up to criticism. It was about bridging divides, finding common ground, and choosing understanding over conflict. Barron took a sip of his now cool coffee, a faint smile playing on his lips. In a world that often felt like a battleground of opinions, perhaps kindness and humility were the most powerful tools of all. Thank you for watching till the end. Video, I hope you enjoyed the story. If you did, don't hesitate to like the video and share it with your friends too. Subscribe to our channel and turn on the notification bell for more fascinating stories.